You know what you're doing. You can see the pattern. You can name it. You can trace it back to where it started. Explain why it formed. Understand what it was protecting you from. And then, you do it again anyway. And that is one of the most frustrating experiences in all of healing. Not the pain, not the loss, but the gap, the maddening, humbling gap between understanding yourself and actually being different. This is about why that gap exists and why it does not mean you are failing. There is a belief that runs through most healing culture that understanding is the answer. That if you can just see clearly enough, explain accurately enough, trace the pattern back to its origins, the pattern will change. And understanding does matter. It is not nothing. Naming something gives you a relationship with it that you didn't have before. But understanding is not the same as changing. And one of the hardest moments in any healing process is the moment you realize that knowing better does not automatically produce doing better. That insight and behavior operate on different timelines, different systems, and changing one does not automatically change the other. When you understand a pattern, when you can see it, name it, trace its origins, you are engaging your mind. Your capacity for reflection, your ability to hold information about yourself and examine it. But the patterns you are trying to change were not formed in the mind. They were formed in the body, in the nervous system, in the part of you that learned, through repetition, through experience, through years of living inside specific circumstances, what to do when certain things happen. And that part of you does not respond to explanation. It responds to experience, to repetition, to the slow accumulation of new evidence that the world works differently now than it did when the pattern formed. Which means you cannot think your way out of a pattern that was never created by thinking. When the old pattern activates, when you find yourself doing the thing you said you wouldn't do, being the person you were trying not to be, falling back into behaviors you had carefully examined and decided to move beyond, something important is happening. The pattern is not failing you. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting you from whatever the original threat was, from whatever made the pattern necessary in the first place. The nervous system does not know that the threat has changed. It does not know that the rooms are different now, that the people are different, that the circumstances that originally required this response are no longer present in the same way. It only knows that this situation feels similar to situations in which the pattern was necessary, and so it activates automatically before your conscious mind has a chance to intervene. Not because you are broken, because you are protected by something that is doing its job, just a job that may no longer be needed in quite the same way. The frustration you feel when you see yourself doing the thing again, being the person again, repeating the pattern again, is not a sign that healing isn't working. It is a sign that something has changed enough for you to notice. Before you understood the pattern, you couldn't see it. It operated below awareness. It felt like personality, like just the way things were. Now you can see it, which means you are watching yourself in real time, noticing the pattern activate, noticing your response, noticing the gap between who you want to be and who you are being in this moment. That noticing is not failure. It is progress. Painful progress. Frustrating progress. The kind of progress that doesn't feel like progress, because it involves watching yourself do the very thing you were hoping to have stopped doing. But the watching is new, and the watching is where change begins. Change does not happen through understanding. It happens through experience. through the accumulation of small moments in which you choose differently, not because you have finally thought your way to a new conclusion, but because you have practiced a different response enough times that the nervous system begins to learn. There is another way to do this. And those moments are small, smaller than you expect. It is not one dramatic decision to become a different person. It is noticing the pattern activate and pausing for 1 second longer than you usually would. It is catching the impulse to over-explain, to apologize preemptively, to make yourself smaller, and sitting with the discomfort of not immediately following it. It is doing something slightly different. Not perfectly, not completely, often imperfectly and incompletely, and noticing that the world did not end when you did. Those moments are the practice. And practice, repeated over time, is how patterns change. The gap between understanding and changing, between knowing better and doing better, is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of how deeply the old pattern was embedded, of how many years it had to practice before you started practicing something different. And you cannot close that gap through self-criticism. Criticizing yourself for repeating the pattern does not accelerate change. It adds suffering to an already difficult process. What works, what actually moves the needle, is something quieter, is noticing the pattern with something closer to curiosity than condemnation. There it is again. I can see it this time. I didn't choose differently today. Maybe I will slightly next time. That is not giving up. That is the actual pace of change. Slower than you want. More forgiving than you are used to, but real. If you have spent time understanding yourself deeply, understanding why you are the way you are, where the patterns came from, what they were protecting, and you are still waiting for that understanding to translate into being different, I want to offer you something. The understanding was not wasted. It was necessary. It is the foundation that makes the next part possible. But the next part is not more understanding. The next part is practice, small, imperfect, repeated. Not the practice of becoming someone new. The practice of choosing, in small moments, a response that is slightly more yours, slightly less automatic, slightly less inherited, slightly more reflective of who you are when you are not operating entirely from protection. You are not behind. You are not failing at something others find easy. You are doing one of the hardest things a person can do, changing a pattern that was formed before you had the awareness to question it. That takes time, more than feels fair, but it is happening. Even now, even here,